The Galactic Council had always feared humanity. They spoke of peace, unity, and cooperation, but when war erupted between two of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, the Exilari Dominion and the Vakir Collective, they had to choose a side. They did not choose humanity. Earth had spent decades proving itself, earning its place among the stars. And yet, when the war began, the Council declared humans to be too dangerous, too unpredictable. Instead of standing with them, the Council aligned itself with the Exilari, an empire known for its ruthless expansion and disdain for lesser species. The betrayal came swiftly. One moment, humanity was part of the great galactic community, and the next, they were declared a threat to peace. Earth's allies turned their backs. Trade routes were shut down. Defenses were weakened from within. And then the attack came. The Exilari struck without warning. Their warships arrived in the Sol system, blotting out the stars with their sheer numbers. Earth's outer colonies were the first to fall. Mars, Luna, Titan, each one reduced to silent graveyards. The Exilari did not offer surrender. They did not send demands. They only sent destruction. Earth's defenses fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and betrayed by those who had once claimed to be their allies. The Council did nothing as humanity burned. They watched as Earth's cities crumbled, as billions of voices cried out, only to be silenced by orbital bombardments. The Exilari called it a necessary measure to ensure galactic stability. The Council agreed. The galaxy moved on. Humanity was declared extinct. But extinction was a lie. In the darkest depths of space, beyond the ruins of Sol, something remained. Scattered survivors, hidden research outposts, warships that had escaped the slaughter. Humanity was not gone. They had fled to the uncharted void, where no empire dared to follow. The survivors did not waste time mourning. They did not weep for the billions lost. Instead, they planned. They rebuilt. They studied their enemy, learning from their mistakes, adapting, evolving. Years passed, then decades. The galaxy forgot them. But humanity had not forgotten. And then, the first signal was sent. It was nothing more than a simple transmission, but it spread like wildfire through the stars. A single phrase, repeated over and over, across every communication channel, across every system, whispering in the ears of those who had betrayed them, "You chose wrong." At first, the Council dismissed it as a malfunction, an echo from the past. But then, entire Exilari fleets began to vanish. No distress signals, no debris, just silence. Planets that had once been secure strongholds were found in ruin, their defenses shut down as if by some unseen force. And then, the ghost ships came. They emerged from the void without warning, black, silent weapons far beyond anything the Council had ever seen. They did not answer hails. They did not demand surrender. They simply attacked with terrifying precision. Exilari warships crumbled under their firepower. Council worlds fell into darkness as their power grids were disabled, their defense systems overridden as if by some unseen hand. Entire planets were left defenseless, their leaders watching in horror as the vengeance of humanity descended upon them. They tried to fight back, but every move was predicted, every countermeasure useless. It was as if humanity had spent decades studying their weaknesses, preparing for this very moment. Panic spread through the Council. They called emergency meetings, trying to find a way to stop the onslaught. They reached out to the Exilari, but the Dominion was in chaos. Their homeworld had already fallen. The Council tried to negotiate, to plead for peace, but the only response they received was the same haunting message: "You chose wrong." The last survivors of Earth had no interest in diplomacy. They had not returned to reclaim their place in the galaxy. They had returned to erase those who had betrayed them. World after world fell. The Council's fleets were torn apart. Their great capital, a planet that had once stood as a beacon of unity, was left in ruins. As the last transmissions went silent, the surviving species of the galaxy realized the truth. Humanity had not been destroyed. They had simply been waiting. And now, they were something else, something stronger, something unstoppable. The Council had chosen their fate long ago, and now there was no mercy left. Only the echoes of a final, chilling message: you chose wrong. For decades, the galaxy believed humanity was gone. The destruction of Earth had been swift, brutal, and absolute. The Galactic Council, alongside their auxiliary allies, had ensured no human colony was left standing. No distress signals had been heard since the final bombardments. No ships bearing Earth's insignia had been seen in the star lanes. Humanity was a dead race, wiped from history as a warning to others who might defy the great powers of the galaxy. The auxiliaries celebrated their victory. The Council called it a necessary sacrifice. The universe moved on. But then, something changed. It began as a whisper in the void. A single transmission, weak and fragmented, barely detectable against the usual cosmic noise. It repeated at irregular intervals, carried across the deep space relay stations like the final echoes of a lost civilization. At first, it was ignored. Just another ghost signal, a remnant of old distress calls bouncing between forgotten satellites. But then, the signal grew stronger, more powerful. It adapted, spreading across communication networks, embedding itself into navigation systems, slipping through encrypted channels as if it were alive. The Council's engineers were baffled. It wasn't a simple transmission, it was a message. A warning. A T first. The words were unclear, distorted by the vast distances they traveled. But as more systems picked up the transmission, the meaning became undeniable. The message was in an ancient human language, one the Council had assumed was lost forever. And it spoke just 3 words: you chose wrong. The Council dismissed it as a hoax. Some believed it was an automated distress signal from Earth's final days, a last desperate cry from a species long dead. But the Exilari weren't so sure. Their paranoia ran deeper. They sent scouting vessels into the void, tracing the source of the signal. Some never returned. Others sent back distorted images, dark shapes moving in the blackness of space, structures where no known colony should exist, silent ships drifting just beyond the range of their sensors. Then, the disappearances began. It started with small patrols, lone warships vanishing without a trace. No distress signals. No debris. Only silence. The Council grew nervous but refused to acknowledge the threat. They called it pirate activity, rogue elements taking advantage of the war's aftermath. But when entire fleets began to go missing, when entire star systems suddenly stopped responding, their arrogance turned to fear. The Exilari, once so confident, started fortifying their borders, pulling their forces back from expansion efforts. Something was coming. Something they did not understand. Then, the first attack came. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A Exilari stronghold, heavily defended, protected by planetary shields and an armada of warships, was wiped from existence in a single night. The last transmission from the planet was nothing but static, followed by the sound of something deep and mechanical, something that was neither voice nor machine. And then, silence. When the Council sent reconnaissance drones to investigate, they found the planet abandoned. No bodies, no wreckage, only a single message carved into the remains of the Central Command Station. We remember. Panic spread like wildfire. The Council convened emergency meetings, demanding answers that no one could provide. Who was attacking? What technology could do this? Where had this enemy been hiding all these years? Theories spread. Some believed it was an unknown alien force. Others whispered that it was something worse. The Exilari, for the first time in their history, showed fear. They knew what the others refused to admit. Humanity had survived. But this was not the same humanity that the Council had betrayed. The humans of the past had been ambitious, daring, willing to compromise for peace. The ones that remained were something else entirely. They had spent decades in exile, growing in the shadows, learning from their defeat. Their ships were no longer made of steel and fire, but of something darker, silent, unseen, ghostly war machines that, one by one, the Council's allies began to fall. Planets went dark overnight. Space stations, once filled with trade and life, were found empty, their systems fried, their airlocks sealed from the inside. The few survivors who managed to escape spoke of ships that moved without engines, of shadows that consumed entire fleets. The Council tried to fight back, but every strategy they deployed was countered as if their enemies already knew their every move. Their ships' AI systems were hijacked, their supply lines cut, their greatest fortresses breached by an enemy they could not even see. And all the while, the same message echoed across every star system: you chose wrong. Desperation took hold. The Council pleaded for peace, sending signals into the void, hoping for a response. But the silence that followed was louder than any declaration of war. They had made their choice long ago, and now they were reaping the consequences. The last strongholds of the Council braced for the inevitable, knowing there would be no negotiations, no surrender. The ghosts of humanity had returned, and they would not stop until justice had been served. In the end, the Council leaders gathered in their final bastion, watching the long-range scanners as a fleet unlike any before emerged from the darkness. Black hulls that reflected no light, weapons that emitted no energy readings, ships that had no names, no markings, nothing but the cold, unrelenting presence of vengeance. The last message humanity sent was not a demand. It was not a warning. It was a reminder of the choice that had been made long ago, a choice that could never be undone. As the void swallowed the Council's final defenses, the last transmission they received carried the same three words that had haunted them since the first signal had been heard. You chose wrong. The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for centuries, believing they had wiped out the only threat to their dominance, humanity. They had watched as Earth burned, its colonies turned to dust, its people silenced forever. The Exilari Dominion had led the charge, their war fleets blotting out the skies of human worlds, erasing entire civilizations in the name of galactic order. The Council had stood by, offering no aid, no negotiations, only cold approval as humanity was condemned to extinction. The war had ended, the victors had celebrated, and the galaxy had moved on. But in the darkest corners of space, beyond the reach of any known star charts, something had survived. Humanity had not been destroyed. It had simply disappeared, waiting for the right moment to return. The first sign of their resurgence was not an invasion, not an attack, but a whisper, a signal spreading across the galactic network. No one knew where it came from. No one could trace it. But the words were clear, simple, and chilling: you chose wrong. At first, the Council dismissed it as a hoax, the work of rebels or malfunctioning AI systems. But then, the disappearances began. Patrol ships vanished without a trace. Entire outposts went silent overnight. Elite Exilari war fleets, equipped with the most advanced weaponry in the galaxy, ceased all communication, their last transmissions filled with static and strange, unreadable data. The Council tried to keep the truth hidden. Something was moving in the void, something that defied all logic, something that knew every weakness of the so-called great powers. Then they came. The first engagement was over before it even began. Exilari stronghold, protected by layers of planetary shields and orbital defense stations, was reduced to silence in mere moments. No warning. No distress call. Only wreckage drifting through space, their great battleships torn apart by an enemy no one had seen. Surveillance footage recovered from the wreckage showed glimpses of ships unlike any the galaxy had known: black, angular constructs that moved without propulsion, leaving no energy signatures behind. They struck with terrifying precision, disabling systems before their enemies could even react. The Exilari, once feared throughout the stars, found themselves powerless. Their proud armadas crumbled. Their mighty warlords, who had once laughed at the idea of human resistance, now begged for answers. But there were none. The Council scrambled to respond, but their fleets were already compromised. Humanity had been watching them for years, learning, adapting. Their lost fleet had not been idly waiting in the void it had evolved. The warships that now haunted the galaxy were not just vessels, they were something more. Ships infused with artificial intelligence, piloted by the minds of soldiers long thought dead, operating without fear, without hesitation. They were ghosts, striking from the darkness, appearing where they were least expected. No force field could stop them. No countermeasure could predict them. It was as if they were always one step ahead. Panic spread across the council's ranks. Emergency meetings were held. Diplomats tried to send peace envoys, desperate to negotiate with an enemy that refused to speak. The Exilari, once arrogant beyond measure, now fortified their homeworld, building planetary defenses unlike any before. They believed they could stop the inevitable. They were wrong. Humanity did not come for territory. They did not come for conquest. They came for vengeance. The attack on the Exilari homeworld was swift and merciless. The planetary defenses never even activated. Before their battle stations could power up, before their fleets could deploy, every system went dark. The power grids failed. The automated defenses shut down. The great planetary shield, the last line of protection, flickered for a brief moment before collapsing entirely. And then the lost fleet descended. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Entire cities were erased in a matter of minutes. The great warlords of the Dominion, who had once ordered the extermination of Earth, now found themselves hunted. Some tried to flee. Their escape ships were caught in orbit, disabled, left drifting as easy targets. Others attempted to surrender, sending desperate transmissions, pleading for mercy. But there was no answer. Only silence. By the time the Council received word of the attack, the Exilari homeworld was already gone. Not conquered. Not occupied. Just gone. Nothing remained but ruins, an empty husk where a mighty empire had once stood. And carved into the surface of the planet, burned into the very crust, was a final message for the galaxy to see: we remember. The Council now faced an enemy they could not reason with, an enemy that had spent decades preparing for this moment. Their fleets were outdated. Their tactics were useless. They had fought wars before, but never against an opponent that had already won before the battle had even begun. Humanity did not need to fight a war, they were the war. The Council's strongest allies collapsed, one by one, each falling into the same silence that had consumed the Exilari. Entire systems abandoned their posts, fleeing in fear of the ghosts that haunted the stars. It was no longer just a military campaign. It was the slow, methodical dismantling of everything the Council had built. As the last remaining Council worlds prepared for the inevitable, their leaders gathered in secrecy, desperately seeking a way to stop the storm that was coming for them. Some argued for surrender. Others spoke of exile, fleeing to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, hoping that whatever force they had awakened would not follow. But deep down, they all knew the truth. There was no escape. There was no surrender. This was not a negotiation. This was a reckoning. And as the final warning echoed across every frequency, the same message that had haunted them since the first disappearance, the Council finally understood the full weight of their mistake. Humanity had returned, not as victims, not as survivors, but as something greater. Something unstoppable. And the last words they heard before the darkness consumed them were the same words that had been whispered from the beginning. You chose wrong. The Galactic Council had believed itself untouchable. For centuries, it had ruled over the stars with absolute authority, deciding the fate of entire civilizations with a single vote. Treaties were written in deception, alliances built on lies, and those who dared to defy the Council were either absorbed or eliminated. When humanity rose as a powerful force among the stars, the Council had feared them not because of their numbers, not because of their technology, but because of something far more dangerous. Humanity refused to kneel. They were unpredictable, relentless, and unwilling to submit to the rule of the great galactic powers. And so, the Council did what it had always done to threats. It orchestrated humanity's downfall, using lies and betrayal to turn the other species against them. The Exilari led the charge, burning human colonies, destroying their fleets, and finally wiping Earth itself from existence. The Council had watched it all from their grand chambers, secure in the knowledge that humanity had been erased forever. They were wrong. The first sign that their past sins had come back to haunt them was the silence. Patrols vanished without a trace. Supply convoys never reached their destinations. Military outposts sent distress signals that were abruptly cut off. At first, the Council dismissed it as pirate activity, the remnants of a forgotten rebellion. But then, the attacks became strategic. A hidden enemy struck their shipyards, disabling entire fleets before they could even launch. Communication relays were hacked, flooding the networks with a single chilling message, we remember. Panic spread through the Council. The XLR, once the proud enforcers of the galaxy, were the first to demand action. They deployed their greatest war fleets, confident in their superior firepower. But their enemies were no longer the humans they had crushed long ago. The fleet that returned from the void was something else, something far deadlier. Human warships, sleek and dark, moved through the star systems like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing before a counterattack could be launched. Their weapons bypassed shields, their technology disrupted entire networks, and their tactics made it clear that they had spent years preparing for this moment. Humanity had not merely survived, they had evolved into something unstoppable. The Council convened in desperation, seeking answers, but the truth was already clear. The betrayers were being hunted. Every species that had turned against humanity now found itself targeted. The XLR homeworld was the first to fall. Their planetary defenses, once thought impenetrable, were useless against an enemy that had studied their weaknesses for decades. The attack was swift, brutal, and precise. Cities were leveled in minutes. Fleets in orbit were turned into lifeless husks. The XLR leadership tried to surrender, broadcasting pleas for mercy across every channel. But humanity did not respond. They did not negotiate. They did not accept surrender. The same silence that had once consumed humanity was now turned against its betrayers. And when the smoke cleared, when the last transmission was received, only two words remained, burned into the ruins of the XLR capital: no mercy. The Council, now fully aware of the nightmare they'd unleashed, ordered all remaining forces to mobilize. But it was already too late. The attacks spread across the galaxy like a storm, consuming one system after another. Planets went dark. Space stations, once thriving with trade and politics, were left as floating tombs. The Lost Fleet did not conquer. It did not occupy. It erased. The betrayers were being wiped from existence, just as they had once tried to do to humanity. As the final days of the Council approached, fear consumed its leaders. Some fled to the farthest reaches of space, hoping to escape the coming judgment. They were hunted down without hesitation. Others tried to forge new alliances, seeking protection from the few remaining powers untouched by the chaos. But no one was willing to stand against the ghosts of humanity. No one dared risk sharing the fate of the XLR. The Council's mighty chambers, once filled with the voices of rulers and kings, now echoed only with the sound of their own fear. Then, the final assault came. The last stronghold of the Council, hidden deep within the core systems, was surrounded. Their fleets, once the greatest in the galaxy, were nothing more than easy prey. Humanity did not send an ultimatum. They did not offer a chance for surrender. They simply descended upon the Council's last bastion, like the force of inevitable justice. Defenses failed within hours. The Council leaders, the architects of humanity's downfall, watched in horror as the end came for them. And just before the last transmission was cut, the debt is paid. The betrayers had fallen. The galaxy would never forget. And humanity, once thought extinct, had become the very thing the Council had feared most, a force that could never be controlled again. The galaxy was silent. Where once there had been the unchallenged rule of the Galactic Council, now there was only emptiness. The great fleets that had once patrolled the stars lay in ruins, drifting through the void as lifeless wreckage. The powerful empires that had schemed and plotted, that had betrayed and destroyed, were no more. The old order was gone, erased by the return of the one enemy they had once believed: extinct humanity. For years, the Council had ruled through deception and fear, using war and betrayal to maintain their control. They had crushed rising civilizations before they could become threats. They had manipulated entire species into servitude, ensuring that no one could ever challenge their authority. And when humanity had risen, when they had refused to bow, the Council had orchestrated their destruction. Earth had burned. Human colonies had been wiped out. Their fleets had been shattered. The Council had celebrated their victory, believing that the last true threat to their power had been eliminated forever. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's ability to endure. From the dark edges of space, the lost fleet had returned, not as desperate survivors, not as a broken remnant, but as an unstoppable force of vengeance. One by one, the betrayers had fallen. The mighty Exilari Dominion, the proud enforcers of the Council's will, had been the first to be erased. Their fleets were destroyed before they could even react. Their homeworld, once the beating heart of their empire, had been left a lifeless ruin. No negotiations had been accepted. No pleas for mercy had been answered. Humanity did not come to conquer. They came to ensure that those who had betrayed them would never rise again. The fall of the Exilari sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Other Council-aligned species, once arrogant in their security, now scrambled to defend themselves. It was useless. The Lost Fleet had spent years watching, waiting, and preparing. Their technology was beyond anything the Council had ever encountered. Their weapons ignored planetary shields as if they did not exist. Their ships moved without warning, striking before their enemies could even detect them. Entire systems went dark overnight, their rulers left with no choice but to wait for the inevitable. And now, it was done. The last remnants of the old order had been erased, and for the first time in centuries, there was no ruling power in the galaxy. The question that haunted every surviving species was the same: what would humanity do next? Would they take the throne left behind by the Council? Would they impose their rule upon the shattered remains of the galactic order? The answer came not in words, but in action. The fleets of humanity, which had moved through the stars like ghosts, now emerged into the light. But they did not claim planets. They did not establish a new empire. Instead, they made one thing clear: the galaxy belongs to no one. The new order was not one of conquest, but of balance. Humanity did not come to rule. They came to break the chains of the past. No species would ever again be allowed to dominate the others. No council would ever rise to impose its will over the countless civilizations of the stars. Those who sought to rebuild the same systems of power and control would find themselves facing the same fate as the betrayers. The message was simple: never again. At first, there was chaos. With no central power to dictate laws, many feared the galaxy would collapse into anarchy. But something remarkable happened. Freed from the control of the Council, civilizations began to rebuild not as subjects of an empire, but as independent worlds making their own choices. Trade routes reopened, no longer taxed by the demands of a corrupt ruling class. Formerly oppressed species, once forced into servitude by the Council, now had the chance to determine their own future. Where once there had been fear, now there was possibility. And yet, in the darkness, there were those who sought to restore the old ways. Hidden factions, remnants of the Council, and warlords who longed for the return of absolute power began to rise in the shadows. They whispered of a new empire, of a return to order. They believed that humanity would soon leave, that their presence in the galaxy was temporary. They were wrong. The Lost Fleet was not gone. It had simply changed its purpose. No longer a force of vengeance, it had become something else: the silent enforcer of the new order. The first warlord who attempted to seize control of a fallen world never had the chance to begin his campaign. His fleets vanished overnight. His armies never landed. His name was erased from history, as if he had never existed. The message was clear. Humanity was watching. For the first time in history, power did not belong to a single ruling empire. It did not belong to a council that dictated the fate of billions. It belonged to no one. The galaxy had been freed, not through diplomacy, not through negotiation, but through the brutal justice of those who had been betrayed. And as the years passed, as new civilizations rose from the ruins of the old, the legend of humanity became something more than just a story. They were not rulers. They were not conquerors. They were the unseen guardians, the force that ensured no empire would ever rise to enslave the stars again. And in the silence of the void, where once there had been the arrogance of those who believed themselves untouchable, now there was only one truth. The new order had begun,